Hey guys, welcome to the football show. For today, we are going to talk about Arsenal specifically and their aspirations for this season. So, my question for you today in this episode is what should Arsenal prioritize, the Champions League or the Premier League? So, without wasting any time, let's get into it. Now, let's get back previous season. So, we challenged in the Premier League for to Manchester City for the Premier League last season, and it was a great season for us. Unfortunately, at the end, we fell off, and the squad couldn't cope up with the pressure. But it was a learning experience for the young team, and we are back again this season, ready to challenge Manchester City. We are 4 games into the season, and we still haven't clicked into gear, but we are hoping that we do that post the international break at Everton. Now, regarding the Champions League, we are back in the Champions League after 6 to 7 years, and previously we had qualified in the Champions League for 17 consecutive seasons. It was a transitional period for Arsenal Football Club. 6 to 7 years, we were out of it. We were in the Europa League. We were out of Europe for one season, and this season we are back into the Champions League. And I personally have high hopes from the team this season in the Champions League and as well as the Premier League. So let's do the Champions League first and then discuss the Premier League after that. So Arsenal is back into the Champions League after a long time, and they would like to do good in the league and go all the way in the Champions League. That is it. So Arsenal's group is pretty easy for me because they basically two of those teams we have lost against in the past couple of seasons. One is Sevilla and the other one is Lyon. So it's not that easy, as I said. Yes, but what it is that group is manageable and we can get out of the group. Remember guys, the top two teams from the group go into the later stages of the Champions League. Speaking of the later stages, in my previous video I had talked about the change in structure in the Champions League, but this is not going to happen this season. It is going to happen in the next season, that we are going to have a different format in the Champions League. So we will discuss that when next season, when it is going to change. But this season it is the same format in the Champions League: the group stages, the knockout stages, the last 8, the semi-final and the final eventually. So what do I expect from Arsenal in the Champions League this season? I expect Arsenal to get out of the group, which is a minimum. If at all we do fail to get out of the group, it will be a failure in my eyes, guys, because the teams which, if you see other groups, there are a lot of big teams eyeing for the top 2 spots in the group stages. Our group is manageable because we have no offense, but not that great teams which are playing. Obviously, Sevilla is the Europa League winner. Lens, we lost to them in the Europa League. But the group is manageable, and given that Arsenal was on par with Manchester City last season in the domestic league, we should have no problem getting out of this group. Alright. What do I expect from Arsenal from that point beyond? So we have the knockout stages and we have the quarterfinals. So as Arsenal fans, we should expect at least quarterfinals. I expect Arsenal to go into the quarterfinals at least in this season's Champions League, and we can see from there on what happens. From there on, if you see last season Inter Milan, if for example, if I put Arteta in charge of that Inter Milan team, we give Manchester City a good run for their money in the final. But unfortunately, Inter Milan couldn't cope up with Manchester City, and they were the eventual champions last season. So if you compare the Inter Milan and Arsenal squad, we are pretty much similar, not in terms of playing style, but in terms of players which we have got. We have a team and we don't have superstars, but this team is good enough to get into the quarterfinals of the Champions League this season, and that should be the aim for us fans. Obviously, Arteta is going to aim to win the Champions League because we are in it, might as well win it. Yes. But it is not that easy, guys. So realistically speaking, we should get into the Champions League quarterfinals at least. And there are teams which in the Champions League which are getting stronger every season. Like Manchester City are already favorites for the Champions League this season. Real Madrid are there always. Bayern Munich will be stronger with the signing of Harry Kane this season, and Barcelona is ever present in the Champions League. So this season is going to be pretty intriguing in the Champions League. But how will this Champions League affect? Because we are going to have Tuesday and Wednesday night games, midweek games in the Champions League, and obviously we will have the domestic league at the weekend. Now I come to the Premier League. Premier League will be on the weekend. How is Champions League going to affect the Premier League performance for Arsenal is only time will tell. Now Arteta had given out a 25-man squad for the Champions League. There were surprising inclusions in those. There was Mohamed El-Neni, who's currently injured, and Cedric Soares, who was there in the squad for the Champions League, who is there basically. And it makes sense, guys, because we have Timber out, so Cedric getting in makes no surprise. But Mohamed El-Neni as well, because Thomas Partey is injured, so you never know. We might need them later on. Obviously, we can add more players in January if at all we sign any. And if at all Timber comes early from his injury in January, which I don't think he will come. But if he comes, we can add him to the list as well. So it's a 25-man squad for the Champions League. How will Champions League affect the Premier League campaign for Arsenal? Only time will tell. But Premier League last season we challenged Manchester City, which was great. We fell off, having led the Premier League for so long. We fell off at the end. Our young squad couldn't cope up with the pressure of Manchester City, which is a great team, by the way. Arsenal is aiming to be at that level of Manchester City, and there is no shame in admitting that we fell off at the end. But we gain valuable experience from that campaign last year, and we will try to rectify those mistakes in this campaign and try to be a better team. Now 4 games in the Premier League, and we have not lost a match. Obviously we have drawn against Fulham, we have dropped points, but we are unbeaten, and there are only 3 or 4 teams who are unbeaten after 4 games in the Premier League, which is a pretty surprising stat, because all the big teams have lost. So Arsenal is still unbeaten, but we have dropped points against Fulham, which is a early knock. But I see Arsenal getting better. For me, I feel Arsenal is still in first or second gear. They need to hit top gear eventually, and there is a chance at the weekend against Everton to do so. Everton is a bit of a bogey team for us lately, because last year we couldn't win over there, the Sean Dyche effect, and before that also we couldn't win. So it's a good chance to get the mojo back in the Premier League, and also we have a midweek Champions League game post the Everton game. So it's better to have a good result and get into and start the campaign for the Champions League. We have a home game in the Champions League, so it is not going to be an issue of traveling and everything. So let's put our strongest squad against Everton, and also the strongest squad in the Champions League for the opener. Alright, so in the Premier League, I expect Arsenal again to challenge Manchester City for the title. There is no divine right for any team to win the not the Champions League, the Premier League. But we have to accept, guys, because Manchester City is above all. And if you look at the other teams, Arsenal is the better of the other teams. Obviously, I have surprise packages for this season. Liverpool is looking good, Brighton is looking good, and Tottenham is looking good, surprisingly. But I expect Liverpool again to come back and challenge for the top 4 and the title. Manchester United is looking dicey. Lot of things are going on at Manchester United, starting with the owners and on-field issues as well regarding Jadon Sancho. Now the latest one with Anthony. So a lot of things are going on at Manchester United. Ten Hag has his hands filled with a lot of things to do, and this international break is basically for all the managers to just reset and get going again after the international break, because Europe will kick in next to next month. The other cup competitions will kick in, the FA Cup, the Carabao Cup. So we need a good squad. Injury wise, we are doing okay in the Premier League. Obviously the Champions League will start, more injuries will kick in. We will need all the players, the whole squad, to come together and put up a good campaign this season, both in the Champions League and the Premier League. So to conclude, Arsenal, I expect them to go into the quarter final this season for the Champions League. What do you think, guys? If you have something, see, for Arteta, the target will be to win the Champions League. It cannot be lower than that. If it is lower than that, then it is a problem for here. So Arteta, if you have to keep the final in mind. Of course, if we reach the final, then it is 50-50 basically, who will win and who will not. But that has to be the target. And in the Premier League, we again have to challenge Manchester City. So this concludes this video, guys. What do you guys think? If you have any other suggestions regarding Arsenal Champions League campaign and the Premier League campaign, you can mention it in the comments below. As always, if you are new around here, make sure you subscribe to the channel. If you are an Arsenal fan, you do not wait, you just subscribe to the channel, because we are bit biased towards Arsenal. Of course, we cover all the football across Europe and in the world, but make sure you hit the subscribe button, and yeah, watch out for more videos. Check our Football Daily, which is also ongoing, and also this is the football show, right? So this concludes the show. I am out of here. Bye.